Hubbub, a chaotic din caused by a crowd of people. Hello and welcome to the Directors Hub Founders Support Club and Hubbub, which is a chaotic din caused by a crowd of people, our podcast series, and we are now on season 2. We would like to say thank you to our sponsors, the Sussex Business Show, the premier game-themed trade show event in Sussex. So thank you for sponsoring us. What I would like to do is just introduce our first guest of the day, and it's Gary Smith of Simply Business Finance. And the talk title today is Business Finance, of course. And it'll be a discussion on how and why you should get financial assistance and what's involved so that you can run your business more effectively. So, welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Sonny. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us on this beautiful sunny day, though obviously the listeners won't know that. But could you tell us a little bit about your business, please?
Yeah, sure. So Simply Business Finance is a completely independent commercial finance brokerage. So what that means is that we will enable our clients and customers to access funding solutions that wouldn't normally be accessible to them. So rather than a client just going straight to their incumbent bank and asking them for funding assistance when they need it, they can come to us. We can actually go to their bank, but we can also go to the bank next door and probably another 250 different lenders that we actually have at our disposal. So it's about providing different solutions for individual customer requirements.
Interesting. And what would you say are the biggest challenges that you're facing in business at the moment?
Well, personally, there's sort of multiple challenges, of course, because we're trying to keep up to date with all the legislation changes. We've got the Consumer Directive coming through next month, of which we are sort of certified, and we're sort of okay with that side of it. But it's more to do with the lenders and how they are actually changing their products and the criteria. They quite often say that a week in finance is a long time. I've got to say, a couple of hours in finance is a long time.
Okay.
I'm constantly getting emails, constantly getting phone calls from our banks and our lenders where the criteria has changed, rates have changed. There's nothing that's actually stable anymore. So what we might have yesterday will be completely different today. So, of course, that's having a knock-on effect to clients. If they go and contact their bank direct, thinking they're going to get one product, the next day it could be completely withdrawn and they've got to go through the process again. So there are challenges that, whilst we're actually having those challenges, keeping on top of it, it's far more rooted. Clients, customers, etc., just really don't have the ability to get the funding that they really do require. The flip side to that is that they're quite often going online. They're looking at the aggregators, the platforms that are out there, and they've got a place. They do work to an extent, but they're not individual enough. And again, the moment they go onto a platform and look for funding, it's out of date. So what they end up with is not what they've actually applied for.
That's critically hard, isn't it? Especially from a regulatory point of view, because you said that you're heavily regulated, and if you're having to change those all the time, so invariably, how does it work? So if how long does the process take for somebody to actually sign up for finance if they're looking to get £3,000 or £5,000? How does it work?
Yeah, I think it really is a case of quantum and what they want. If they're looking for sort of 3,500 or 3,000 to 5,000, I should say, that sort of level, that's relatively quick in most cases. There are funders out there that would just make a quick decision. We know the right people to go to, and that's the benefit of using a finance broker rather than just going to the bank. If it's something a little bit more bespoke, such as maybe property finance or restructuring of existing business debt, the process at the start, coming through a finance broker, should be relatively straightforward. We should be able to get decisions within 5 days, generally, for the client. The process thereafter could take a couple of weeks, could take a couple of months, or in some cases, dependent on what the client's actually doing, could actually take 12 months.
Wow. So that's a huge change in how and what they're looking to achieve. Do you find that people tend to, I'm not obviously asking you to name clients because obviously it's confidential, but do you find that the majority of people tend to go for low amounts, or do you find from that people are looking for much larger amounts and within the restructuring process of a business? So obviously if they're moving into a new property, there's a whole sway of different costs that I guess they have to look into.
There are, and I would say there's two very distinct things there. If someone's moving into a new property, we might be asked, and we have been asked by our clients, to actually fund the property itself by way of a commercial mortgage, which we'll do with one of our many funders. Then, of course, you've got the equipment that goes into the office. Again, we may use a different funder for that side of it. They may require some working capital for marketing, taking on additional staff, etc. It's not just one facility to capture the whole thing. There'll be multiple facilities that we put together so that it spreads the client's risk, but also the funder's risk. They're not all in it, and funders don't like to have overexposure to any one client. On the flip side of restructuring, what we are seeing are smaller requirements coming through in some cases, but because of the information that we get, and because we like to get to know our clients on a sort of professional basis and actually get every bit of information we can out of them to ensure we're going to get them the best deal, whilst we might be approached for 5,000, 10,000, when you actually peel back the layers, you realise it's not actually 5,000 or 10,000 they need. They, in a lot of cases, could actually need a lot more.
Okay.
What we are finding is a lot of clients are going out and they're just stacking. So they may have gone online, they may have got a short-term facility of a relatively low amount to start with. Could be, again, 5,000, 10,000, could be 20,000, whatever the figures are. They get used to having that facility, but it's a relatively short-term and at quite high rates. They then go out and try and find another lender that would do something similar. So when you actually look into their overall commitments, they could owe 50 or 100,000 in some cases. So then when they approach us for another 5,000 or 10,000, it's quite evident that they just want to borrow that money to pay the premiums or the payments on the existing debt. So we can provide that to them, but we come back with different options. We always say, well, yeah, you can have that, but is that the best use of your resource? Have you considered taking those facilities out, extending it over a longer term, put it onto a proper structured transaction that will actually be a lower interest anyway, but it just enables your cash flow, so you don't then have to keep going out borrowing 5, 10, 20, 15,000, on a sort of very frequent basis just to pay the existing debt.
It's really interesting to say that because invariably, if you've said that it's taking up to 12 months sometimes to put everything in place, and with the rates changing all the time and fluctuating on a day-to-day basis, that must be extremely difficult to actually keep the costings down when they've signed up at one time and then the rates change. How do you adapt to that?
Quite honestly, you can't.
Okay.
In the current climate, August, September last year, it was relatively straightforward. The funders would normally stick to a rate, and that would be the rate going forward. But because there are so many fluctuations out there currently, it swings and roundabouts. We've had clients that have approached us. We got them the funding that they wanted at the start of this year. They then drew down a couple of months ago. So it took a few months to get in place, and the rate had actually reduced. So in that case, that client won. But on the flip side, we've had other customers come through and the rate has gone up.
So it swings and roundabouts.
It really is, yeah. So as long as they've got it in their cash flow and their forecasting to make sure that they can cover those costs and they can service it correctly, they're okay. Where it does fall down is where you get property investors, which is a completely different sort of animal when you think about lending. Property investors have got to make sure that the rents that they're collecting have a certain coverage for the mortgage that they're taking out on that property. And of course, as the interest rates go up, that puts the monthly payment up, even if they've taken it over the sort of extended term. That could actually throw out the debt service cover. So what they thought was viable when they first put in a bid to actually buy that property becomes no longer viable for them nor the lender.
Wow, I thought my job was difficult.
Yeah.
Learning about all the other businesses that are coming in for the podcasts, it's absolutely amazing to actually hear what it is that you go through on a day-to-day basis. I mean, on that kind of idiom, what does a typical day look like to you? Is every day different, or do you have a set process for each day that you're doing different things?
Every day is so different. Yeah, we've got so many different clients, which range across all sectors. We deal with a lot of professions, so solicitors, accountants, which can be introducers to us, but also our clients, and we can help their clients as well, as part of reciprocal. We have clients that are in hospitality, which have been hit massively, obviously, during the sort of lockdown. They're coming out the other side of it now. We've got engineering clients. Every client is different. So we have to put so many different hats on during the daytime, and you have to get personally involved with that business. You have to look at it as, right, what would I do if I'm running this business? You can't just look at it and say, here you go, that's all you can have, take it and close the door on them. That's a lifetime relationship you're going to have with that client. So every day is different.
It's very interesting to hear your take on your organisation. It sounds really difficult. I guess it shouldn't be, but does it? Do you get to a stage where it gets quite overwhelming, or do you just take each day as it comes, with reference to all the things that you have to do, especially if every day is different? For me, I have a structured format to each of my days, but if every day was completely different, I think I'd go slightly mad.
Yeah, I know what you mean. The structure I have, and I am actually quite regimented with my structure. So dependent on what day of the week it is, will determine how that day is structured.
Of course, yeah.
But obviously you've got your core hours, and my core hours are typically 9 till 5, because that's typical sort of banking and typical business hours. Now, I know obviously businesses work around the clock in a lot of cases, but nothing generally happens outside of 9 to 5. So they are always going to be my core hours. I always take an hour's lunch, and that's always between 1 and 2. I make a point about that because I think if I start skipping my lunch and actually start doing something out of the ordinary, then that's my own process is failing me. Everything else then could start suffering as a result. If I deviate from what I know and what I'm used to doing, then I think I would struggle. So I will make a point, 1 o'clock, okay, down tools. It might not be necessarily having lunch, but it might just be going out for a walk, going out for a wander. Just do something where I'm away from my desk, away from the phones, and that is it for that hour.
I think it's so important to be able to have that mental mindset, because you have to look after yourself. And funnily enough, when I first met you a while ago now, a few years ago, and you gave me your business card, the first thing I did was write on it, do not call between 1 and 2.
Brilliant.
just to make sure that customer focus was there, and from a mental health point of view, that you would be left alone.
Yeah.
And it is so important. You should be able to step away from your business, whether it's for an hour or a day or however long a period of time you need, because you need to de-stress and just think about yourself from a self-care point of view, because we're overwhelmed by business, aren't we?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And doing what I do, I take on a lot of pain and stress of my clients, because I hear some real horror stories where, help, I'm going to be losing my business if I can't do this, or I've been let down at the last minute by my bank because they promised me this, and it then turns out that actually they can't deliver this. Can you help me? Which, of course, I will look into, and I can't help everybody, but I'll look into it. And at that point that I'm looking into it, what they had looked at probably 6 months prior, thinking it would be absolutely fine, all of a sudden becomes an emergency for them because they need the funding tomorrow or next week. So all the pressure then comes on to us to actually make sure that, A, we're delivering the correct product, but also in a timely fashion for them, because it can have major effects on their business.
Are there any kind of, just staying on that point, with reference to clients, are there any kind of huge kind of success stories? I don't mean monetary wise. I just mean clients that have come to you with an issue that you've resolved, and like you've sat back at the end of the day and gone, you know what, that was brilliant. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, have there been difficult circumstances with clients that you've had to negotiate with?
Yes and yes,
Okay.
is the answer. So I always look back at a case that we did for a independently owned boutique hotel. Very, very nice property. Their incumbent bank was in there for a considerable sum of money to help them refurbish, make sure that it was all satisfactory so they could continue trading. They just wanted to update things and keep things going. Lovely business. Unfortunately, as part of the refurb, they actually discovered that there was asbestos in some of the rooms. So that meant that this hotel could not operate at capacity. That had a detrimental effect on their cash flow, of course. They had to close a particular wing down as well as some other rooms. So it ended up operating probably at about 25%.
Wow.
Which put massive great strain because, of course, they'd got this whopping loan out with their bank and they just weren't able to keep up with the demands because, of course, they wanted to pay staff. So the bank had no option other than to foreclose and bring in the liquidators. So we were actually approached by the liquidators to see if we could actually help them and do some restructuring, which I'm glad to say we were able to help. We managed to lift out the bank. We put some other senior debt in. We put it on terms that were actually favourable to the client. And as a result, the business then retained its ownership. They were able to take on some additional owners, which helped them in terms of management. But more importantly, we saved 110 jobs.
That's just absolutely astonishing, and kudos to you for being able to do that. Because invariably what sometimes happens is, like you say, the bank steps in, forecloses, businesses folds, and then everyone loses. No one wins anything. Yeah. But by what you've done, as you've said, you've secured a legacy for that boutique hotel to be able to trade for a much longer period of time and come out the other side happy. And that's what it's about, isn't it? It's all about customer service at the end of the day.
It really is, yeah. And on the flip side, which kind of answers part two of your question, I suppose, which is kind of related in some respects. We've got clients that we're speaking to where we put forward good packages in order for them to have their business run successfully. They go and speak to someone else, the so-called experts, which is probably their mate down the pub, and they're advised, close your business. If you've got some existing debt, just dump the business. And they don't really realise the impact that's going to have on them in the future, because there's a thing called crown debt, of course. So if there's any HMRC debt that's owing, VAT, PAY, etc., they can come in and they are a preferential creditor. They can take whatever they want to get their money back. So dumping a business isn't the most sensible thing. Now, there are cases for dumping a business, but not just to avoid debt. You're better off working through it if you can. Those that dump the debt and then start up again under ABC UK Limited, for argument's sake, instead of ABC Limited. Not to say there is a client necessarily. I'm sure there is an ABC Limited. That they would go out and start up again the following day, running exactly the same business, exactly the same staff, but under new contracts, but under a new business. Now that business, the new business, the Phoenix business, if you like, has got no chance of getting any future credit, because all lenders and all banks will look at it and say, well, no, sorry, you've dumped a business and you left a load of debt behind you, so you're now coming to us for more money. You're not going to get it. So these so-called advisors that are telling people to dump business, I'd say exercise some caution.
That's really interesting. I'd never even looked at it that way. And I guess, I didn't know about the Crown debt aspect of it, which is absolutely brilliant and should be transferred, because you do hear about all types of trade organisations or businesses in general doing a not so good job, and then, as you say, dumping that debt and then setting up as a new company, and you hear it all the time on documentaries on TV and radio and so forth. So it's nice that that is in effect to protect people.
Yes. I think what it boils down to really is business finance isn't just about borrowing money. It's not just about leveraging money. That's a big part of it. Anyone that wants to expand and grow their business, let's look at the positive side of it. It's far better to leverage other people's money than your own. Go back to a simple cost accounting. If you buy a machine in an engineering company, if that machine, including all the finance charges, the staff costs, everything else, costs you £100 an hour to operate, you've got to make sure that that machine's generating £100 plus the profits you want out of it. Now, the easiest way to keep track of that is by making sure that that machine is on finance, because that's a fixed cost through that term. It's not going to deviate. The more hours that you actually get that machine working, the more profit you're going to generate. So it's actually self-financing over the term. So rather than using your own money, you're far better off keeping that cash within the business, so that if you do get things like crown debt suddenly jump up, or you take on a bad debt yourself, you've got some reserves where you can actually get yourself out of it. So always use other people's capital if you can to grow and expand your business.
Absolutely, fundamentally clear with the focus, isn't it? I mean, there's a great deal of choice out there for businesses that do kind of along the lines of what you do. So what kind of things do people look for when they're fundamentally looking for services like yours? Do they tend to go down the route of just going onto a search engine and putting in the first ones they see, or is it more based on recommendation than anything else?
I would say that our business is based more on recommendation. We do have a great sort of web presence. We've got good social. That works. That's absolutely fantastic. But I think that just really goes to reinforce that we are an entity that exists, as opposed to anything else. We're not necessarily looking at going out to the masses and getting inquiries coming in left, right, and centre, because with that creates more work. What we're really focused on is looking after our existing client base and those clients that get referred to us by our existing clients, so that we can actually have that long-term solid relationship. We'd far sooner do that and grow with them. We'll grow our business with them growing their businesses, rather than going out there trying to look at getting a sort of market share, if you like. And I think what's evident in the sort of recent months or recent years is that more and more businesses want to deal with people that are local. The platforms you can go on, you can punch in what you're looking for, and it's going to come up with all these different options, which, let's face it, are just shop. It's just sort of window shopping, really. It's going to come up with all these different rates, and you're going to go, yeah, fantastic, that one's the cheapest, why wouldn't I go for it? By the time they've actually gone through that process of trying to apply for that particular finance facility, they're not going to get it. They could be a million miles away, for all they know. They don't really know who they're dealing with, so there's no real trust. There's no longevity to it.
I think trust, that word is used. I was at a networking event this morning, and that was one of the words that came up. And every time I speak to clients across the whole of Sussex and beyond, the trust element is the fundamental core focus of the brand. And as you said, there's an overwhelming level of companies on the search engines, and you can be bewildered, get bewildered by the amount of companies that there actually are. So that, by getting them on referral and recommendations, which is a much nicer way of actually getting clients, I think, as opposed to cold calls, because you just don't know. And everything takes such a long period of time to get those clients in place.
It really does. You're absolutely right. And if a client is recommended to us, we treat that as a genuine inquiry.
Yeah.
We do get, through legacy, I've got clients dotted around the whole of the UK. I've got clients up in Scotland, I've got them in Newcastle, I've got them in Wales.
Wow.
So, we're happy to deal with those clients. Now, they will refer us to other people in that geographic area, absolutely fine. If people find us outside of the sort of southeast, London southeast, via our website or through a social media post, we'll always question it and say, well, why are you coming to us? Because we know that people like to deal with people that know the area and understand where they're coming from. So we'll speak to them. There's more risk of that deal not actually being a real deal. Someone just kicking the tyres, just wanting to really see what they can get, which we haven't got an issue with necessarily.
Yeah.
You know, they just want to sort of test the water. That's absolutely fine. You know, it doesn't cost them anything. So we'll always entertain that. But more importantly, from our point of view, we've got to think about the fraud aspect. You know, if we're dealing with people that we know and people that have been referred to us by people that we know, there's less likelihood of it being fraudulent.
Very interesting. With reference to loans that people get from your business or businesses like yours,
Yep.
obviously there's no business like yours, but obviously we just obviously break into that before I say anything. So obviously, if people want kind of loans, do they tend to go for like unsecured business loans or secured business loans, or professional loans? I mean, what's the real difference between them?
Well, okay, so professions loans are generally from lenders and providers that really understand the professions market. So you'd be talking about accountants, solicitors, or a multitude, architects, surveyors. So what they class as professional firms, doctors and veterinary practices, etc. They will have a particular department that understands that whole industry. So they've really got the finger on the pulse. They know what to look out for, and they can read between the lines in a lot of cases.
Of course, yeah.
So professional loans is a sort of separate category. When you think about unsecured or secured loans, they could be professions loans as well.
Okay.
So you could get a professional that would approach us, and we have done. You know, we've helped a number of legal firms where they're on an acquisition trial to actually sort of say, yeah, we're going to go and buy this firm next door. We've raised X amount on the expected income, which has been on an unsecured basis by way of a professions loan, but they just need a top up, in which case they'll provide a bit of security, which will then enable us to bolster what they've already got and actually get them closer to the actual desired figure that they're after. Now, the biggest difference between a secured and unsecured loan, of course, is that there's generally more flexibility with a secured loan. They can do seasonal payments. They can extend the term. You could have zero payments at the start. It might be that you have reduced payments at the start. And generally, the rates are going to be a little bit more keener because obviously there's security there. So, and there's going to be more flexibility. With an unsecured loan, it's very much down, obviously, to the current and historic serviceability. So a business might approach us and say, okay, we're going to be starting up a completely different division within our business, our organisation. We need £50,000 to do it. If the accounts stack up for them to borrow £50,000 and we can get it on an unsecured basis, which is normally going to be supported by a director's guarantee anyway, so it's not completely unsecured, but you'd have that facility in place. Now, it might be over a shorter term, because the lender might say, yeah, we'll do that, but it's only going to be over 2 years. We might be able to get 3 years, might be able to get 4 years, but generally 3 years is probably going to be the limit on an unsecured. If the accounts don't stack up, but the customer, the client actually approaching us for the funding, knows that they're going to turn that £50,000 into £100,000 in the first year or £200,000 the following year, then they're more likely to actually go down the secured route, because they can't get the unsecured lending. And this is where we get the problem of people stacking. That's when they'll go out and they will borrow the smaller amounts from multiple places and try and build it up and say, right, I've got the total of £50,000. But they'll be paying eye-watering rates. It's only going to be over a 12-month term at best. And the hoops they would have had to jump through would just be a complete nightmare for them. And from that word, from the get-go, they're going to put themselves under pressure financially.
And then, in essence, that's not a place anyone really wants to be. No. Because running a business is a bit of a shit show at times.
It is, very much so, yeah.
To be careful what I say. But it is extremely difficult running a business and getting everything right the first time.
Yeah.
Doesn't invariably happen. so we found that we now know a lot more about your business. So, with reference to your kind of the business name,
Yep.
I mean, it's simply it's straightforward.
It is,
and it says what it says. It says what it does on the tin, I guess.
Yeah.
So, how did you come about the business name?
So myself and my ex-business partner, we were thinking about how do we best define ourselves, as what we do. And there's so many generic finance brokers out there that call themselves different names, some of which mean certain things to certain people, but doesn't actually mean anything to anybody else.
Yes.
So we just said we just want to keep it really simple and straightforward. And we just kind of said, what about simple business finance? We thought, no, that's probably not right because it's not simple. It's actually very, very complex behind the scenes. But from a client-facing point of view, we want it to be as simple for them as possible. So we just checked out a few names on Companies House, made sure that no one else had it, and surely enough, no one else had the name. So we formed the company and called it Simply Business Finance, just to follow the complete ethos of us making it simple for our clients.
Which is, in essence, the most simplistic format to actually put the business through. And I love that you haven't tried to make it difficult for people. And also, it's much easier on the search engines, I would think, to find those kind of words as well.
Yeah.
What I struggle is when people use words that are so difficult to pronounce, you can't find them on the search engines and you just give up.
Yeah.
And then you tend to go just for a competitor or something that's got
Absolutely.
an easier wording.
Yeah.
With reference to your, we've obviously delved into your business, which is obviously what it's all about.
Yep.
But I'd like to find out a little bit more about you, really. So, what do you do in your spare time, or do you not really get spare time? Because obviously, invariably you need to spend time with, as you do in your lunch break, I guess, between 1 and 2. But in your spare time, what do you get up to?
Do you know what? I mean, the spare time aspect out of it is really, really key. As I say, I run a sort of fairly regimented day, and outside of that, I do martial arts training. So I make sure that I attend regularly. I go on a Tuesday, a Thursday, and a Saturday morning. My little son, he's just actually decided to come with me, which is great news.
That's brilliant.
So I make a point of making time to do the things that are important. And of course, outside of that, it's not just about me, it's about the family as well, the kids. So whilst I'm out on a Tuesday evening, Thursday evening, and a Saturday morning, outside of those times in the evenings, I'll spend time with the family. I try to make sure that I'm there or at home when the kids get back from school, even if it's just to say hello. I'll go and continue my work from my home office or something, but it's just to say hello, to make sure that I'm present and the kids actually get to know that I'm there, and if they need me, they can always call upon me. So that's kind of a sort of usual week, if you like. I'm a sort of keen runner. I go out and listen to music events. Go and try and catch a few sporting events. So, bizarrely enough, even though I'm very busy, we do as a family have reasonable sort of spare time.
Which is critical mass to your business.
Yeah.
As you have such a structured work life, you need to be able to step back and enable yourself just, to commit to family time and, like you say, in the sporting events and stuff like that. And that's brilliant that your son is now doing that.
It is.
I do Tai Chi
of course.
in the very early mornings before the twins get up.
Yep.
And my little daughter has just started karate.
Yes,
and now
you mentioned.
her brother has also decided, obviously the twins, he's technically 2 minutes older, and he loves to lord it over her.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Who's the older brother? Oh,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am. Oh, here we go again. But he's now said he wants to do karate, so
Brilliant.
there'll be both of them doing it, so
Yeah.
they'll be spending a bit more time doing it. But do you do any other kind of martial arts as such, or do you just have one defined kind of thing that you do?
It is karate. That's what that's what I practice, and I think that's helped massively with my discipline, because it's a very disciplined martial art. Unlike kickboxing, I mean, it's still a martial art and it's great. It's very active, but it's not as disciplined as karate would be. And I think once you follow a sort of process and you have that discipline built into your mind, you can then transfer that skill into your professional life. So it not only becomes who you are, and obviously very much in your personal life, you can actually adapt that and transfer that skill for everything that you're doing.
It's interesting you said about the discipline aspect, because my twins, well, they're not massively disciplined, but now that you've said that about karate, that's going to hopefully bring them into bear, with reference to what they're going to be doing through the course of their life.
Yeah,
I mean, they're only young, but obviously that sets them up for that process in their mindset, I guess. Who would you say is your kind of biggest inspiration in life, and why?
God, okay,
it's a big question, I know.
That really is. It's such a difficult one, because if I sort of look back over my working career, I've been very, very lucky that the businesses that I've been involved with have been pretty much startups themselves in some respects. And I've been involved with 3 businesses now, which are still ongoing. They're still very strong, trading nicely. And each of the shareholders that kind of backed me to help them grow their businesses, I've taken massive great inspiration from. They've always been present. They've always been approachable. They've always helped with anything. So, I've been extremely gifted with the people that I've met and worked with over the years. So I don't think I could say one person.
No, it's it's always a difficult one, isn't it? Because we've all been, whether we admit to it or not, we've all been mentored in some form or fashion in what we've done, whether it's by your parents or whether it's by an actual, business coach as such to push you to the next level and so forth. But it's never an easy question to answer, and I kind of threw that at you, so I do apologise.
No problem.
With reference to just going back to kind of, your kind of personal life, really.
Yep.
So where did you grow up? Have you always been in Sussex?
Yeah, I'm Brighton, born and bred. So I spent, crikey, too many years in Brighton.
Haven't we all?
Yeah. And moved out of Brighton, must have been about 14 years ago. My daughter's just had her 12th birthday. So, yeah, it was about 14 years ago. Got married. And, of course, the natural progression is that we obviously want to start a family. So I always wanted to be close by enough so that I could help my wife out if she needed help, see the children. So that was always the plan. So we kind of sold up from Brighton, moved up to Haywards Heath just to see if we liked it. That's where my office had at the time relocated to from Lewis. So it kind of made sense to be on the doorstep, as it were. And yeah, then along came Eva. And we looked back and sort of said, okay, she's going to be starting school, obviously, in a few years' time. Do we want to stay in Haywards Heath, or do we, move somewhere else in mid-Sussex, or do we move back to Brighton, which is where my family and friends are, and Louise's family and friends are as well? And we decided that actually we like mid-Sussex. It's just such an accessible place. You can get into Brighton and see your friends and family very easily, very quickly, and you can get out very easily and quickly, but have the quietness and the quaintness of mid-Sussex. So Brighton's very busy, which is great, but you want to be able to walk away from that at times.
Step away a bit at times, don't you? I think it's part of the reason why we kind of moved to Hurstby Point, in the same kind of idiom, I guess, that we wanted to be able to have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
So have the busyness of Brighton, which I love and adore, but also be able to step back a little bit and, still be in kind of, not too far away from Brighton.
Yeah.
I think we're very lucky in Sussex.
Yeah.
I think we sometimes take it for granted that it's such a beautiful county and there's always so much to see. Just taking you back a little bit further, it's not on the questions, it's another one thrown at you from a curveball, okay, so I do apologise. What was and I'm kind of intrigued by this one, what was your favourite subject back in school?
Oh, that was maths.
Of course, it would have to be, didn't it?
Well, no, not necessarily.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Do you know what?
Tell
it's so
more.
strange. Yeah, it's with maths. I like the certainty of it. It's an absolute science. So I always really enjoyed maths. Learning about not just knowing that 2 plus 2 was always going to be 4, but it's why does 2 plus 2 equal 4? To me, it was actually really breaking that down and learning the mechanics behind maths.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Because, I had this conversation with my son, Jack, a few days ago, and we were talking about maths, and we were talking about the number 8. Not because he's 8, he's 9 now, but we were talking about the mathematical equations of 8.
Yeah.
So, like 7 plus 1, 4 plus 4, and 5 plus 3, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And all the different equations that roll back to that single number. And you're right, it's an absolute science.
Yeah.
So, you can't get it wrong.
No.
And you can't do anything without maths.
No, you can't. And, I'll throw this one in. When I actually left school, I wanted to be an architect. So I was learning all about sort of construction, in the foundation stages, and calculus and maths came into it so much, and I found that it really, really helped with that side. So it's just one of those subjects that I just absolutely loved and still do to a point.
It's brilliant that you do, otherwise you'd be struggling in your business.
I probably would, yeah.
We're coming towards the end of the podcast. I can't believe it's been nearly 45 minutes already, which is a bit insane.
Yeah.
But I'd like to ask you a couple of, if we can, a couple of kind of personal questions that we've highlighted, some whimsical questions, and then maybe one or two, if we have time, like an industry experience or like a closing question.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah? Okay, so the first one is, what's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
Best compliment, going back to my family again, always, just completely unprompted. I was at home, watching the TV, not minding my own business, drinking a cup of tea, and my daughter, I mentioned, she's 12 now, so this must have been a couple of years ago. She just came in completely unprompted, sat next to me, gave me a hug, and said, "You're the best daddy ever."
It's wonderful when they say that. It really is, because it humbles you.
Yeah. It just came out of nowhere. I hadn't done anything particularly special for her that day. It wasn't as if she had been asking for something. I'd gone out and got it for her. She just did it off her own steam. Just came back and said, "You're the best daddy ever."
Oh, it's beautiful. It's very nice. So, next question. How would your parents describe what you do?
So my dad's no longer with us, unfortunately, but my mum, she has been into my office, and she's a number of times commented and said, "So what I get from you doing your work is that you're behind a computer and you talk all day." Which I'm kind of like, well, I suppose, yes, that's probably it.
It is quite hilarious. I've got 4 brands within my business, as you know, and one of those is a trade show. And when Granny came along to the event last year with the twins, she walked in, and because it's a professional trade show and it's hundreds of businesses, she walked in and she went, "Oh, so this is what you do? I thought it was like a village fair."
It's great, isn't it? A perception. Yeah.
Perception is everything, isn't it? Everything.
Amazing.
So, it is. So the whimsical question is, would you say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
So I would say that I'm very much an introvert. Okay. Probably not on the sort of scales that people recognise it necessarily, but I'm always happy to listen to people. And I think that's why I've succeeded so well in doing what I do for my business. Just really like to listen and gather more about people. So I'm not the first person to go in and start shouting. Now, my wife would probably disagree with that. She'd say, no, you're always there. You're always at, front stage and centre and all the rest of it. But yeah, I'd say I'm on the quieter side.
Excellent. We're running out of time. I've just been given the nod, so I've only got a few minutes left, so I have to speed up a little. So as a closing question, what are 3 books you'd recommend to your audience and why?
So, the books that I'm reading currently, I've got 2, actually, that I'll go through just to keep it shorter. Yeah. So one is The Analysis of Genuine Karate. Okay, now that's all about misconceptions, origins, development, and the true purpose of karate. And it's great because it goes back to the traditional karate as opposed to the sports karate that we actually see on TV. Now, the reason I bring that up, it's something that I do personally. Obviously, that's one of my main hobby. But when you actually translate that into business and professional, you can actually see how doing it the old way isn't always better, but it's no less sort of current than doing it the new way. So you've got to blend the two together to actually make sure that both aspects, the old and the new, work together to actually generate something that's actually newer.
Interesting, like a fusion.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And the second.
And the second one is How Not to Die.
Okay.
Now that's by Michael Greger. Okay. Now he's a doctor. He lost his father at a relatively young age, I think he was, and he wanted to go out and investigate how people were living in different areas, so different continents, Asia, America, Europe, and he went round to actually analyse how people were, or what the highest risk to them was medically, which would end up being terminal for them. So he went out and looked at the different foods and the different drinks that they were having, and he's actually written a book to sort of say, right, these people have avoided this particular disease, these people have avoided that particular disease, and found out they've got a higher concentration of this in their diet and they've got a higher concentration of that. Now, the reason I'm reading that and the reason I'm bringing it up is because I think if you look after yourself, you're going to put yourself into a good stead, A, for your own personal life, but also for your business life.
Absolutely brilliant. I really, really appreciate you bringing those to bear. Thank you, Gary, very much for coming along today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No worries at all. We'll see you again very soon.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hubbub, the Directors Hub podcast, sponsored by the Sussex Business Show.